Jay Haynes for the Film Sensei YouTube channel. Have you seen The Queen's Gambit? This limited series was my favorite show that I watched in 2020. And when I saw the shot where the chess pieces were moving around on the board as if in the mind of the main protagonist, Beth Harmon, I thought, man, I could make that effect. So let's take a look. Before we begin, would you do me a favor and just real quickly like this video? It really helps my channel. Also, if you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe and click the little bell icon for notification. And if you know somebody who you think might actually enjoy this content, please share it with them. Thank you. So my first thought was to use stop motion animation, which actually would work very well if you went that route. So what I did was I set up a chessboard and then I took a picture of it and then I moved a piece slightly and I took another picture and then I moved that piece again and I took another picture and so on and so forth to create sort of the illusion of movement of those pieces on the board. Now, the issue that I had was that I didn't do a very good job of controlling the lighting on this. But if you're interested in stop motion animation, I will leave a link in the description to a video that I did on how to do this effect easily and quickly. So I took a bunch of pictures and then what I did was I brought them into HitFilm and under File, Options, General, Picture Plane Text Default Duration, I set that to 1 frame and clicked OK. Then under File and Project Settings, I reset the frame rate to be 15 frames per second. Then I selected all of those pictures, and with them all selected, I simply dragged those onto the editor timeline. So now you can see that they are all sitting over a span of about 3, almost 4 seconds. And with them all selected, I right-click and say Transform Fit to Frame. And so now you can see, if I just sort of move forward, that each piece is moving. You can tell that I had some lighting issues. You can tell that my camera moved a little bit. You just can't have those things happening. But here's the deal. On every single one of these, it looks like stop motion animation because there's no motion blur. So what you will need to do on every single one of these is make a copy of that. I'll just select a frame and hit Control C on my PC, and then I will hit Control V and select Create a New Track. Now, I would actually probably do this with every single one of these, so I would literally just copy all of those into a video 2 track. And then on every single one of these frames, I would use a freehand mask tool to very roughly sort of select that piece so that I have it masked out in front of the board. And then I would use an angle blur effect and I would drop that onto that particular masked frame, and I would extend that to what I felt would be needed, and of course I would adjust the angle so that it looked like it was moving with motion blur. Okay, and then when it stopped, I would not have any motion blur on that, and it looks sort of like this. So you get an idea of how that would actually look if I had done it fairly well, and so it's very doable in HitFilm Express. But then I decided to go ahead and try this in HitFilm Pro. So I started by taking this 6.5 second raw footage shot and I brought it into HitFilm Pro. I then made it into its own composite shot, and then I used the Foundry camera tracker to track the whole shot and set up a 3D camera system where the camera is moving as if it was the real camera. And I have a video on how to do that, and I will leave a link in the description below if you don't know how to use the Foundry camera tracker to accomplish that in HitFilm Pro. I then rigged up an entire chess set model system in HitFilm Pro, and I created a project file that has that chess set in it. Literally every piece out of all 32 pieces has its own point for positioning, and then the entire chess set is in one model layer. And that way, when those pieces move around, they're occluding each other perfectly. For my Patreons, I am going to provide this project file for you, for my Greenbelt level patrons, and that will be yours to keep. Otherwise, you can obviously create your own chess set and rig it up. It did take me quite a bit of time, so if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, I would really appreciate it, and I will be happy to provide this project file for you so that you can use it yourself. Then I imported this composite shot, and I dropped in all of these assets into this main shot. I then placed those pieces on the board exactly where they belonged, and then I proceeded to animate each of these points as necessary. And if I hit the U key, you can see all of the different points. Notice I used Bezier points. And so as I am going through this shot, you can see how each piece moves when it's supposed to. Also, I animated scales so that if a piece was taken in the game, then that scale went to 0, and therefore that piece wasn't there anymore. Then I set up the model itself. I had to obviously light the model. And if this was a reflective chessboard, I would have needed to place reflections, but I'd used a chessboard that didn't have any reflections, so no problem. Of course, I set up the environmental map. I set up the ambient occlusions, and I also set up a shadow plane right here. And again, if you don't know how to set up a shadow plane, I will leave a link in the description to a tutorial that I did on how to do that. And then, of course, I finished with the idea of adding motion blur, and I specifically set up the motion blur to match what I wanted it to look like in the original source footage from the Queen's Gambit. And so pretty much in a nutshell, that's how I did it. I did do a few other minor tweaks. I color graded it, of course, and I added some extra doodads that help your models look a little bit sharper. But it really wasn't that difficult. It just took a lot of time. So if you have any questions about how something like this could be accomplished, please do me a favor, drop them in the comments. And otherwise, I appreciate you watching.